Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast, Life Through My Lens. I know it's been quite some time since I've posted on the channel, and for a good reason because I recorded that last episode and kind of touched on the fact that I was coming down with something that I was trying to kick, and unfortunately wasn't able to. Ended up having to go to the doctor. Was placed on antibiotics. Had like a double ear infection, like sinus infection, all kinds of nonsense. It's kind of typical this time of year for me. Um, that transition to spring and that transition into fall always seems to get me here in Tennessee because of all the pollen. But hopefully, I'm on the back end of this thing and I'm able to kick it pretty soon. But I was feeling good enough today after that horrendous Titans game to go ahead and hop on here and give this a shot. Um, Congestion wasn't kicking me too bad, so um, here we are. And I wanted to. I've been meaning to actually address this for quite some time, but I've been kind of going back and forth in my mind about it because I didn't really know which angle to take when discussing this because with this particular subject, it's not too difficult for me to get triggered because I tend to get upset talking about it. Easy to get frustrated because this is a situation that in my life I haven't had really much control from the get go, and it's very difficult to be in this situation. Not only in my life, but after doing quite a bit of research, I noticed that there's a lot of men out there who have been dealing with this same thing too. Some even worse. But this situation pretty much is, when you're trying to be a good parent, make the best decisions for your children. Um, Sometimes you can be placed in situations where it's extremely difficult um, to make the right decision when it comes to your children. But I was young when I made, or I'll say I was young when I was forced to make a lot of these decisions at a young age like that, trying to, do what's best for everybody involved. And I know I'm kind of talking around the actual subject, but I'll go ahead and state what it is I have a daughter and she's 12 years old, and we no longer have a relationship. And that was not by my choice. It was not by hers. And I know it's easy to kind of place blame and point fingers at the other party, um, or the other parent, but I can't really do that. It's tough for me to do that, even though I know that she has more of a control over that whole situation and has from the beginning. But um, the older that I get, the more that I've been able to think about it with a level head, um, and think about it in a logical sense. It's tough for me to really blame her either because the situation that all of us were put in was so difficult to handle. And I mean, I'm not making any excuses. A lot of it was brought on because of our own decisions. But, when you're faced with a situation like we were, it's so tough to know what's right and what's wrong. And being as young and as inexperienced as we all were, it sucks. It really does. And I hate every day that I don't have a relationship with my daughter because of a lot of the decisions that were made. Love and miss my daughter every single day. It's tough. It's really tough. And like I said, after doing a lot of research online, I see a lot of men go through this, and that's why I figured that it was, it's probably a good time to actually address it, talk about it, get it off my chest. So hopefully, if there is somebody who's struggling with the same thing, going through possible situation like that, or like kind of at the crossroads, like we were back in the day, um, maybe they can, run across something like this, and it could possibly help them in some way. But for me personally, I got married back in February of 2010. And that the story of my marriage, how it all began, the struggles throughout the entire marriage, and why it ultimately ended, that's a story for another day. But my marriage actually is largely tied in to the reason why the relationship between myself and my daughter actually diminished, why it became so difficult for my daughter's mother, and for us to have any kind of civil relationship to where we could co-parent properly for my daughter. And ultimately, the reason why I ended up, not having a relationship with my daughter at all. And now, unfortunately, my daughter, not only does she not live in Tennessee or anywhere near me, and not only do I no longer have any type of contact with my daughter, but she doesn't even live in the United States anymore. And that's tough. That's so tough. And, it's something that I battle with every single day, because I have a great relationship with my sons. I really do. I love my sons more than anything in this world. And, that is something that I've strived so much to make sure that I do right by them, because, I regret every day how I fumbled that whole situation and dropped the ball with that situation with my daughter, and how I missed out on having a good, healthy, loving relationship with my daughter. And it basically, the way that it all fell out was, I was 23 at the time. And like I said, I got married back in February of 2010. And it wasn't too long after I got married that things began to get really rocky between me and my then wife. Um, and largely because she had a lot of stuff going on back at home down in Florida. Um, and ended up in ultimately a custody dispute between herself and her son's father. Now that placed us and our marriage kind of in a stranglehold, because she had to go back down to Florida to to fight through that whole process. Now I couldn't go. I had to stay up here. I had to stay in Nashville and take care of things here at home. But as time went by, things became more and more difficult throughout that custody battle, and ultimately led to a situation where it was like, you know, it was looking like she wasn't going to be able to come back. And I I didn't really know what to do, and I was kind of racking my brain at the time to try and think of, some kind of resolution, some kind of way to fix this. I didn't know whether to stay, whether to go, but you know, as time went by, like I said, things got more and more difficult, but also with her being there, me being here, questions started to arise. Insecurities started to get the best of both of us, and me in particular, because um, what happened in 2009 played a huge role in my decision making, as it was in moving forward in my life and kind of jumping into marriage the way that I did. And again, you know, with my marriage playing a large role in what happened between myself and my daughter and my daughter's mother, that is a story for another day. But there are some key points in that marriage that I do want to, bring up and point out when discussing this particular situation, because they played a key role in a lot of the decision making. Like I said, back in 2009, if you didn't know already, and I've posted an episode regarding this. A lot of people already know about it already, but if you don't, in 2009, I was in a 4-year relationship with Sahel, Jenny Kazemi, who ultimately, after we broke up, ended up in a relationship with Steve McNair, and then unfortunately, um, they ended up passing away in a very tragic manner, and it flipped a lot of people's lives upside down, including mine, during that whole situation, and I faced the probably the darkest moment in my entire life when that all went down, and being reacquainted with my then wife before we actually did get married. There was a spark there initially when I first met my eventual wife. Excuse me. That when we did become reacquainted, um, essentially gave me hope again, where I didn't feel it in any aspect of my life at that point in time. There was a spark of hope by becoming reacquainted with her and having her back in my life, that this wasn't it. This wasn't the end for me. Love could happen again. I could fall in love again. When I thought that that was impossible after the fact that all that happened in 2009. And because of that feeling, I wanted to grab onto it, and I never wanted to let it go. I wanted to hold on to that forever, because I was terrified that if I didn't, that I might never find it again or have happiness like that again. And that played a major role in me and my decision making in jumping into marriage like that with my then wife as quickly as I did. And I strongly feel that if it wasn't for everything that happened in 2009, I would have never rushed a situation like that. It would have been a much longer dating process and stuff like that to kind of iron things out, really get to know each other. But instead, because of the way that I felt, the anxiety surrounding the entire situation, not wanting to lose that feeling, want to hold on to that feeling of hope. Really, I didn't want to lose that. So I grasped onto it, held onto it, and jumped into marriage way quicker than I probably should have ever done. So I did that, and then the story unfolded the way that it did, where we were up here living in Nashville, and she ultimately had to go back because of the custody dispute. Now, during that custody dispute, like I said, questions had arose between the two of us. Insecurities were starting to set in. My anxiety was starting to set in, because obviously, I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose that marriage. I didn't want to lose that feeling of love, that hope. So, anxiety and insecurity started to kick in. I started to question a lot of things. And ultimately, I ended up finding out that she was cheating on me. And once I found that out, it was hard. It was so tough to find that out. It broke me. It really did. It broke me, because it wasn't just, oh man, like my wife that I've never been married before. This is, my wife. She was like, at the time, she was everything to me. And to not only find out that she was cheating on me and for it to break me in that aspect, it was also that feeling of losing that hope for having happiness again, genuine happiness, and love in my life again and stuff like that. So it broke me in numerous ways, more ways than one. And I kind of, over time after that, had occurred and I had found that out, we started, it we were kind of both reluctant once it came out, but you know, started working ourselves in the direction of going our separate ways. And she had actually ended up kind of like back in a relationship with the father of her son at the time. Now, when I found that out, I'm like, okay, like, so we're gonna have to like officially go our separate ways. So the talks of divorce started, coming up, and we started making the necessary moves to either get our marriage annulled or have to go through the process of divorce. And we were young with a lot of mixed emotions. So one day it would be, we need to end it all, go this way and go that way. Another day we would be sitting there like, I don't know, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't, and stuff like that. So it was like a juggle emotionally between the two of us, but we never seen eye to eye. Um, and when I officially found out that she was actually, going through the proceedings, and she had filed some paperwork, and she was actually like going full fledged back into a relationship with her son's father, um, that's when I'm like, all right, you know what, I can't deal with this, and I started making bad decisions and going back out to the club. I was hurt, and I didn't want to feel that pain. I know that I had done a lot of work and put in a lot of effort to get over the pain that I had already dealt with and felt in 2009, and this was just 6 months later. Like not even a year later, I'm already dealing with something like this again. Not to that extreme, but obviously it hurt. So I started going out with friends, going clubbing, drinking a lot. I was staying drunk. It had got to the point to where it wasn't just weekends. I was going out on weeknights. I was spending every loose dollar that I had on drinks, at the club, on, girls, meeting girls, dating girls, just left and right. Just try to keep my mind off of what was bringing me pain, right? So, sorry, need this. So, anyways, it it was not doing me any favors by making those decisions and living my life like that. But in the process, I uh I was out one night with some friends and ended up being introduced to who ultimately ended up becoming the mother of my first child, which was my daughter. Now, we met each other briefly, kind of hit it off that night. She had definitely caught my eye, and um, it was, feeling was mutual at that night. Sparked it up, ended up exchanging numbers and talking, and later on ultimately ended up hanging out and going out clubbing and stuff like that together. And where things seemed nice and I was enjoying her company, I was still really hung up on my wife at the time and still in love with her and that idea of that life, and not ready to let go of that, even though it was heading down the path of divorce and she was seemingly moved on. Um, but to kind of numb the pain, I continued on this relationship with the mother of my daughter. Um, and because I didn't make the correct decision and not do that, um, she ultimately ended up becoming pregnant. Now, clearly, the complication in this situation was the fact that I was still married legally, even though we were separated, and my wife at the time was pretty much moved on and in a full blown relationship back with her ex. Um, this woman that I had basically just started to get to know lets me know that she's pregnant. I had no idea what to do. I had no clue. But Even though it caught me completely off guard and it's not something that I was prepared for at all or trying to do, it happened. And I made a pledge and a vow to myself then and there that no matter what, I was going to be fully active in my daughter's life, regardless of the direction that the relationship of mine and her mother, you know, took. I was going to be the best father possible. I was going to be, loving, caring, and just do my best in every aspect of being a good father for her. And what is so wild is the fact that when all that went down, obviously I had to tell my wife. So I do. And at first when, she she tells me this, she's like, at first when I tell her this, she tells me, okay, well, thank you for telling me, and I guess I'll follow through with the divorce proceedings. And I felt at the time like, okay, this is it. Like, it's officially done on my end. And now, regardless of how I feel emotionally and, all of the feelings that I was having, I was going to go full fledged into trying to be, that supporting father, be there for her mother, and it, I was gonna set my feelings aside and do right by them. So I did that. But uh that's when things started to get really complicated. And this is why I say my marriage had a lot to do with how things turned out with my daughter, because after that situation that occurred, um my wife started at the time started to kind of give mixed signals about actually following through with the divorce. There was some situations that had occurred like later on where some things went nuts on social media between you know my then wife at the time and then the girl who I was dating who had become pregnant, and they were going back and forth with a whole bunch of nonsense, and it was just it was just, it got crazy. It got real crazy. But my wife at the time was not following through with the whole divorce process. And I looked into it myself. It was going to cost me an arm and a leg to do that. I did not have the money whatsoever to afford a whole divorce process or anything like that. The difference was my wife at the time, she had like all kinds of outlets that she could take to where it was going to be extremely cheap for her to do it. She could have easily done it on her end without having to pay money or anything like that. I think it would have been even free for her to do, but she ultimately refused to do it. So, with her refusing to get the divorce and basically kind of putting me into a situation where she's like, if we're going to get a divorce, you're going to be the one to have to do it. I'm like, I'm sitting here already battling myself, trying to set my feelings aside for what I had developed for my wife and falling in love with my wife and being placed in a situation where we were married, not wanting to lose that, being broken over the fact that she had cheated on me and moved on with, getting back with her ex because of everything that was going on. And now all of a sudden I'm about to be a new father. I do not have these feelings developed for, you know, the girl that I was dating at the time, but I was trying to put those feelings, set those feelings aside so that I could possibly develop those feelings for her. That was my goal. I wanted to do that for her because I felt that was right by her, and I wanted to give it a genuine opportunity and shot. And I couldn't have the opportunity because of everything that was going on with my marriage. And it was just so crazy and everything was so up in the air that ultimately ended up being my wife having to come back to Tennessee to get the remaining of her belongings. So we had this long conversation where um, she talked to me about coming back and staying up in Tennessee for a couple of weeks um, to like really talk things out and see the direction we wanted to go. Because in those conversations that we had prior to this, we had let it be known that both of us still had the feelings for each other, but life had kind of dealt us a crazy hand. And even though I had ignored the massive red flag that she had cheated on me, which is wild to me when I think back at it, I was so caught up in not wanting to lose that feeling of hope and love and everything like that. I was actually willing to give this a shot. And no matter what I had decided to do, no matter what occurred on, in this relationship with my wife and the marriage, or the relationship with, you know, my new child who was on the way, and who was my daughter and her mother, I had already vowed to myself, nothing was going to change the fact that I was going to be a full-fledged father and do right by my child and be the best father that I possibly could be, no matter who I was with, ultimately in the long run. But basically, what made this situation so complicated was the fact that my wife ended up coming back. This was actually discussed with um, the mother of my daughter, and I'd let her know the true feelings about the situation. She actually, she was reluctant at first, but she understood because of how crazy the situation was. And I had to, I told her I have to see if there's still anything there, because to I don't want to look back and this be something that I regret for the rest of my life. You know what I mean? Because life dealt us a crappy hand or whatever. And this is the things that I was telling myself because of how crazy things were going on in my mind, and I was so conflicted at the time. I was completely ignoring the fact that I had been cheated on. But either way, I go through with this whole 2-week process, and of course, being married and her staying with me, we were together multiple times. Um, I thought I was doing the right thing. I really did. At the time, I really thought that I was doing the right thing. And she ends up going back to Florida because she has to. Her son's there. And later on, I find out that she is actually pregnant. And I'm being told that my wife is pregnant with my child. And it when that happened, I was at a loss for words. I had no idea what in the world to do, because she couldn't come back to Tennessee. She was pregnant with what I was being told was my child, but I also had my first child on the way with a woman who I was not in love with. And I was 23 years old, completely inexperienced, never been a father before, had no idea what the right move was at all. And I know I went into a lot of detail as to how that actually led up, but I feel like that it's very significant to explain how that all got to that point. But it ended up getting to the point to where I was ultimately put in a predicament to where I had to choose. I had to choose my wife, my marriage, the woman who I was still in love with, and our child, or my first child with a woman that I barely knew and that I wasn't in love with. It took a lot of time, a lot of conversations with not only them, but family and friends, and everybody had their opinions and they all differed from each other. There were some opinions that were driven by likes and dislikes of certain people, and then there were some opinions that were driven by, you know, the well-being of my own personal life, or just it everything was different, coming from all different angles, and I had absolutely no idea what to do. The more and more that I talked to people, the less and less that I knew. So what further complicated the situation was the fact that it started to come out that the father of my wife's son, who she had basically jumped back into a relationship with during that custody dispute to have a relationship with her son, he was claiming that she was pregnant with his child and it wasn't mine. Then on this end, it was discussed between myself and my daughter's mother if she had been with anybody around that time frame. And since we were kind of non-exclusive, we were just casually dating, she had actually been with her ex. And she wasn't 100% positive if she was pregnant with my child. And the only way to know was if we were to go to the doctor after the children were born and have paternity tests done. I'm lost at this point. I'm lost. I have no idea what to do. But one thing was becoming clear, is that my wife was really coming on strong to reconcile with me and reconcile our marriage, as at the same time things were starting to go very sour between myself and the mother of my daughter while she was pregnant. And because of the lack of knowledge of actually what was true, what wasn't true, whose child was whose, I ultimately decided to try and salvage my marriage, salvage the relationship who I was already in love with, my wife at the time, and basically pray to God that she was actually pregnant with my child. Now, another thing that actually kind of encouraged me in that direction was the fact that I tried to get the mother of my daughter back then to go with me to find, the conception date, because you could actually check that with certain doctors and they'll tell you like the time period or whatever. And we could never line that up. Even though I went to multiple doctor's appointments with her, I don't know if it was just bad timing or if maybe she was reluctant to do it because she was scared of the possible truth. But I actually did go with my wife, and that doctor told us face to face that the time of conception for her child that was on the way was during the time frame when she was in Tennessee with me for the 2 weeks. That's pretty much what made my mind up at the time. And as crazy as that situation was, I made it very clear, regardless of my choice to reconcile my marriage and be back with my wife and fully recommit to my wife and be there for our child that was on the way, I was still going to be a present father in my daughter's life, and I was going to be the best father that I possibly could be, and I had the full intention to co-parent correctly and respectfully with my daughter's mother, but that was not my daughter's mother's goal at the time. She was irate that I had chosen to reconcile with my wife at the time, And this is where I can honestly say, like, it's tough to not point fingers, but looking back and hindsight being 2020, I completely understand her being upset. I mean, she was being left alone to raise a child she fully believed was mine. She was one of the ones who was like, but she cheated on you. I mean, look what she's doing. The only problem was is that I was still in love with her, and I was letting that overtake the fact that all of this stuff over here actually happened, and I should definitely be taking that into consideration, but I wasn't, because I was so torn up inside by what happened in 2009. I never wanted to feel like that again. And because of the feeling that I could hold on to that and have a hopeful future about being in love again and having love again and happiness, I overlooked it. And I made that decision. And ever since I made that decision to stick with my wife, the relationship with my daughter was completely torn from the beginning. And even though I made so many attempts to be, present in her life and be a good father, be there for her and everything like that, it was never really there. It was never really given a chance to be there, because once I made that decision, I mean that put a damper on the future for both of us moving forward in a way that was pretty much irreparable. Now, ultimately, later on down the road, my wife actually ended up cheating on me again, which I should have easily saw coming, but because I ignored the flags back then to hang on to the emotional aspect of the situation and hopefully, not lose that portion of things, I ended up getting burned again. And because of that, I don't know if I mentioned or not, but I went back to Florida after I made that decision. Um, I went back to Florida to be with my wife because she could not come back up here. And one of the reasons why I made that decision was because the daughter of my mother, or my mother, God, I'm trying to get these words out. It's difficult. My daughter's mother, when she was pregnant with my daughter, when she found out that I was going to try and reconcile with my wife and fix my marriage, she got upset and said she no longer wanted to live in Tennessee and decided to ultimately move back to Washington, D.C. to be with her mother. When I heard that she was going to do that, that's when I said, okay, well, then I'm going to go down to Florida and be with my wife. I need a cup of coffee. Hang on. I'm sorry if this is all over the place. I know I do tend to ramble, and timelines might be all crazy, but to be quite honest, I pretty much freestyle this stuff. I don't really go off of notes or have any kind of script or anything like that, because I try to keep it real and genuine, as if you were sitting in front of me talking to me about this. Um, but yeah, so jumping back into it, when I went back down to Florida, things fell through again after about a year or two with my wife. Found out she cheated again. Um, so I ultimately decided to come back home to Nashville and reboot. And this time I was like, all right, I don't care how expensive it's gonna be. I'm gonna file for divorce myself. I'm not doing this over and over and over again. Well, my daughter's mother, who, over time we had found out that, we didn't get paternity tests done or anything like that. Neither party got paternity tests done, but it over time it started to become more and more evident um, that my wife's daughter that she was pregnant with, that she had claimed was mine, and the doctor said that the conceived date was while she was with me, was not my daughter. And she looked just like my wife's son and my wife's son's father. It was pretty evident what was going on with that situation. And then through pictures and discussions with my family who had a relationship with my daughter back here in Nashville, whenever she would come back and bring my daughter to visit, it was pretty evident that she actually had my daughter. She looked just like me. So knowing that and finding out that my wife had cheated yet again, I was like, that's it, man. That's it. I'm going back home and I'm going to try and reestablish a relationship with my daughter. So I did. And when I reconciled, with my daughter's mother at the time, we started talking again. She was still staying up in DC, but she started working it out to where when she found out I was coming back to Nashville, she made the decision to come back to Nashville too. And that's when I had probably the best, or had established the best relationship between myself and my daughter. At that point in time, I had started to get to know her. I started to spend one-on-one time with her. She was calling me daddy. She knew who I was. I was getting, like taking her places, buying her things, spending as much possible time as I could with her. But it was clear as day that her mother, who had initially developed feelings for me back when we had first started dating, that she had started to kind of rekindle those feelings again by being around me again. And I think that she became hopeful that we were going to give us another try. And honestly, my number one goal was to come back, have a relationship with my daughter. I did not want to go through what we had went through again. I had done that again. The last thing I wanted to do was make the same mistake again. But having her around and having her be the mother of my daughter and her being around whenever I would have a lot of time with my daughter, her company became very convenient, and my loneliness and not having my wife or my family anymore started to take a toll on me. So being young and stupid, I ended up enjoying her company a little bit too much, and we ended up starting what was perceived on my end as casually dating again. She kind of went full-fledged in on the whole relationship aspect of it and allowed herself to develop stronger and stronger feelings. I couldn't, because I was still emotionally invested and tied to my wife. I was still in love with my wife, regardless of what had happened. When you fall in love with somebody, it's not that easy to just cut that off, turn those feelings off, and walk away, regardless of what they do to you. And me being so torn up the way that I was about what happened in '09 did not make it any easier for me. But over time, that got complicated, and didn't really know how to handle that. But I didn't necessarily do the right thing to stop it either, because I was enjoying her company, and not being alone was important to me, because I did not want to become depressed and down. I didn't want to give myself any time to sit around and think about what was going on, because I know me, and I know if I did, things were going to get tough and really get bad, and I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't. So I wanted to stay distracted, and at the time, my daughter's mother was very convenient as far as providing good company for me at that time. But round two of the divorce talks began between me and my wife at the time, and ended up coming to a crossroads again, and she did not want to follow through. She did not want to get a divorce. And she placed me in a position yet again to where I would have to 100% follow through. But at this time, I was being put on child support for not only my daughter here in Nashville, but child support for who is legally my daughter back in Florida. Now, my wife knew, and I knew, and everybody knew that even though I was legally considered to be my wife's daughter's father, that it was truly not the case. We all knew we did not need a paternity test. So when I found this out, it further complicated things. She knew by doing that I would not financially be capable of filing for divorce. And how in the world I let these things completely just go over my head the way that I did it's beyond me. But lo and behold, we ended up back together. I mean, I'm not gonna dive fully back into that whole conversation because that's a long story. But ultimately, we ended up back together because divorce became financially impossible I knew for myself, but also for her as well at the time. So not only did I, get back with her, but she moved up to Nashville. And by her moving up to Nashville, I had established a really good relationship with myself and my daughter. And I had a good thing going, a good schedule and everything. And when my wife moved back up with her son and her daughter, who was legally mine, but we knew wasn't biologically mine, when they moved back up to Nashville, that's when things started to really become complicated because there was very, very evident resentment between my wife and the mother of my daughter. And where I tried my best to balance the relationship with my wife and then my daughter, that resentment between them two would always clash and get in between myself and my daughter. And ultimately, it ended up coming in between mine and my daughter's relationship to the point to where I stopped being able to get her. If it involved my wife, we started having like accusations thrown in our direction because my daughter's mother hated my wife so much to where she started like making these false accusations regarding me and my wife at the time because of the hatred between the two. So we would end up in court and then she wouldn't show up because she would file these bogus order of protections, and she did this multiple times. So she knew that there was no issue between, and see, this is where I get triggered. This is where I get frustrated. It's where I get aggravated because she knew that there was nothing, negative between myself and my daughter whatsoever. And she knew that if my wife was out of the picture, there would be no issues. It was only when my wife was present or in the picture that there ever was issues. But she was allowing her hatred for my wife come in between the relationship between me and my daughter. And because of that, and me having to go to court to defend these allegations, because she was saying, there was, like my wife was like, punishing my daughter, this, that, and another. And so many allegations I knew wasn't true. She wasn't showing up and, these things were being dismissed, but it was just causing such chaos in our lives and everything that it was literally preventing any type of reconciliation going on between me and my wife because we were so focused on what was going on there, which was honestly her ultimate goal. She wanted to come in between me and my wife again, whatever, But the problem was is she wasn't only doing that, she was coming in between me and my daughter as well. And that made me develop major resentment towards my daughter's mother. We were always at odds. I was always in a predicament with her, an argument, a debate, and it just put such a strain on mine and my daughter's relationship to the point to where she ended up ultimately meeting someone at her job, and after she met this guy, um, basically, he had a lot of money, and they kept pushing the court situation to try and prevent my daughter, not prevent my daughter from being around me, but prevent my daughter from coming over to my house because of the hatred that she had for my wife. She didn't want her daughter around my wife. And that's what it was. Not because anything was really going on, but it was because she hated my wife so much at the time that she was willing to take my daughter out of my life in order to prevent my daughter from being around my wife at the time. Very complicated to kind of wrap your mind around. It was very complicated for me at the time. I didn't know which direction to take. I spent a lot of money trying to fight it in court because she started going against the court documented paperwork, all of this stuff. She started going against the parenting plan. She wouldn't allow me to get my daughter. Whenever it came time for me to get my daughter, she would file another bogus order of protection. And things just became so sour that she ultimately presented me with this thing. She said she was moving out of town. Now, at the time, she said, I don't know if she was actually married, because she ultimately did get married. But I don't know if she's married at the time or just engaged. But she said that I think she might have actually been married, but I think she said her husband got a really good job offer because he's ex-military, and he was retired, had a lot of money to throw around, and it was easy for him to assist her in this manner. But apparently he got a good job opportunity out of the country, and it was initially supposed to be temporary for a job opportunity in Germany. They were only supposed to be there for not a very long amount of time, and she obviously needed my permission. And it was pitched to me that this would be good for my daughter, that my daughter would, have an immense amount of, opportunity by going overseas to Germany. She would be able to attend school for like a year or something like that. It was supposed to be like a year, maybe two at the max, I think. But she would be able to learn things that she wouldn't have the opportunity to learn here. She was going to be able to learn a different language, um, go to like a really highly touted school there, be able to travel, see new places, just kind of like it was pitched to me like this was like a temporary getaway that would be a very positive thing in my daughter's life, a breath of fresh air for everyone, and then they would be back. And then hopefully when they got back, I would be able to reconcile with my daughter and hopefully start fresh. Now here we are. It's 2023, and I have not seen or spoken to my daughter since they left. And there's so many days that go by where I'll wake up with my daughter on my mind, or I'll be scrolling through pictures on my phone and I'll see pictures of me and my daughter, and I'll miss her so bad and regret so many choices that I made, and think to myself, well, if I had just done this way, or if I had just, handled this situation like this, that things would have been different. But the fact of the matter is, here I am. My daughter, I think, left when she was. When was this? I can't even. I've lost track of time. Honestly, it's like she was maybe like 3 or 4 when she left, and now she's 12. I think it's been like 8 years. 8 years since she's been gone, and I have not spoken a word to her since she left. Now, ironically enough, when my marriage did come to an end, um, my daughter's mother did reach out to me. I don't know how she knew that we had divorced, but she did reach out to me, and it was shortly after that we had split up. But she reached out and started conversating with me through text messages and emails and sending me pictures, and really got me hopeful for establishing a new relationship with my daughter. And then all of a sudden hit me with a major blow, asking if I would give up my rights to my daughter to allow her husband to adopt my daughter. When I tell you I was disgusted when I got that message, I can't even begin to describe how I felt. And obviously, I said no. I said I don't care, how much child support I gotta pay. It's no money is worth me giving up being a father to my daughter, regardless of how long you keep her away from me. No matter what lies are told, no matter how far away I am from her, no matter how long we go without speaking a word, I will never willingly give up being a father to my daughter. And I still stand by that to this day. I haven't spoke to her mother since that. She knew that she deeply offended me with that message. And the pictures stopped, the messages stopped, and I was never given the opportunity to ever talk to her again. My daughter probably has a terrible picture painted in her mind regarding me because of all of the turmoil and commotion that happened in, my life and her mom's life and what was going on back then. But, it sucks because the truth is she does have a father here. She does have a biological father that loves her, that misses her, and that would give anything to have a relationship with her again. And she does have brothers. She has brothers here that ask questions about her all the time. I have pictures around my house of her that my sons see, and they ask all the time, when we ever going to be able to meet her? Can we ever talk to her? And all I can say is hopefully one day. Hopefully one day. But the purpose of me sharing this story and publicly talking about this really for the first time ever, I've never really talked about it, especially to this extent. But the purpose is because, like I said, I did extensive research before I decided to talk about this, and I saw on so many Reddit threads and YouTube videos and stuff like that, where there are so many fathers out there who are put in this predicament and given the ultimatum to where they have to choose their children or something else because of the the disagreement between their the mother of their child or whatever it might be, and it's not easy. by any means for anyone to be put in that predicament, to have to choose. Like I can't even really, even if I was given the opportunity, because I've thought about this plenty of times, even if I was given the opportunity to go back, I still can't really wrap my mind around like what I could have really done correctly because of how crazy that situation was. But one thing is for sure is no matter what, and no matter how crazy that situation was, I loved my daughter and wanted nothing more than to be a good father to my daughter. And there's so many men out there that just want to be good fathers, but because of the disagreement between them and the other parent, and them not being able to see eye to eye, or resentment towards exes or current relationships and stuff like that, that adult nonsense and commotion comes in between the genuine relationship between parent and child. And it happens way too frequently, especially in America. And, after reading a lot of these threads and seeing a lot of these men's stories, and, some of them being way worse than mine, um, my heart goes out to them because I know what I deal through on a day-to-day basis. I know how much I miss my daughter. I know how much I wish I had a relationship with my daughter, and I can't because my hands are literally tied. I know I could flex, to an extent, my, parental rights and try to take this back to court and everything like that, but people don't understand, the extent of how difficult that really is, because when I say the court system is not in any way in the favor of the father, it is not in favor of the father. In no way. I learned that the hard way over so many years of not only dealing with this with the situation regarding my daughter and her mother, but throughout the process of my divorce and having to fight tooth and nail to try and establish a relationship with my sons because of the games that their mother was playing and the strings that she was pulling in the courtroom because she knew she could get away with it. Us men, us fathers who are doing nothing but trying to be a good father and be there for our children, get ran through these courtrooms because of how these laws are set up to favor the mother and really phase out the father, because it's a big money game. They want your child support. And they don't care about what else you got to offer. But that's the whole see, this is me getting triggered, and I can go off on a soapbox on that situation. I'm not gonna do that. So, the whole purpose of this is I want to share this story because, hopefully any guys out there that are going through this same situation or who are possibly faced with this same predicament, the same ultimatum, can see my story, see the decisions that I made, and maybe it can help them, in the long run. Or if nothing more, help them feel like they're not alone in this whole situation, because there's many of us out there who are dealing with this, that, deal with, a non-existent relationship with our child, or a very strained relationship because of the relationship that you have with the parents or anything like that. So just felt like it would be a good thing, not only for me to talk about it myself and kind of get a lot of this stuff off my chest, but hopefully be able to utilize this story to maybe help someone else dealing with the same thing. So feel free, reach out, whether it be comment, message. You can reach me on any social media outlet that are linked in. And I'll talk to you. I got a lot of a lot of experience in these situations that, if I can help anyone, if not only one, that's a win for me. Like I've said multiple times in the past, if I can just help one person by sharing some of these stories that I went through, then that's a positive and a win for me. So I'm not gonna continue to ramble on any further. Um, like I said, some of these things that I've touched on, I'll end up further, exploring in upcoming episodes to the podcast. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free. Drop a comment below or send a message. I'll be here and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible. But as always, I really appreciate you listening in and giving me your ears for as long as this might have taken. But keep your heads up. No matter what you're going through, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how impossible it may feel. I am living proof. No matter how impossible, it will always get better. So until the next episode, thanks again for listening. And until the next time, life through my lens.